manipulative, selfish. He's scared for what his future entails. Scared that he texts on Tinder Victoria at 9:52 with some corny pickup line. Keep in mind, when he Tinder messages Victoria, Jasmine is dead in his apartment. Uncontested facts. Is this the mindset of someone that just irrationally stabbed a girl 60 times?
Tuesday night, November 22nd, 2022. Katrina Bean was in the kitchen moving between casserole trays and pie crusts. This Thanksgiving was going to be different. The whole family would be gathering on Thursday, but this time without the woman who held them all together. Her mother, gone just weeks before. And the emptiness wasn't something a turkey dinner could fill. Katrina didn't expect the holiday to feel right, but she didn't expect what came next either. As she wiped her hands and glanced at her phone, she saw a message from her daughter Jasmine, or Jazzy, as everyone called her. It said she wouldn't be coming. She was staying at her friend Emma's for the rest of the week. Katrina froze, not angry, just confused. Her daughter wasn't the type to hide her grief in the company of others. When Jasmine hurt, she isolated. She disappeared into herself. This didn't track. And this time the pain was heavier than usual. Jasmine and her grandmother had been inseparable. So close, the family restaurant had even been named after her nickname, Jazzy's. Thanksgiving came and went. But what stood out wasn't who was there. It was who wasn't. No word, no call, not even a text. Jasmine had vanished from the family conversation. By Saturday, Katrina's unease turned to dread. She tried calling Jasmine's phone. It was off, straight to voicemail. Then she called Emma. What she heard chilled her. Emma hadn't seen Jasmine since the 22nd. She said she'd received a text from Jasmine saying she just wanted to be alone. Emma thought it was strange too, but she'd respected it. Katrina didn't. She knew her daughter. Something was wrong. She called every friend, every contact. Everyone said the same thing. They all got the same kind of message. Jasmine saying she needed space. Then her phone buzzed again. It was Travis, her ex-husband, Jasmine's father. His voice was tense. "Did you see what she just posted on Facebook?" Katrina opened the app. The caption read, "Thanksgiving with my baby." But the image didn't match. It was revealing. It didn't look like Jasmine, not her style, not her voice, and something else. Something that turned confusion into panic. The tattoos gone. From that moment on, this wasn't a missing person case. It was the start of something much darker, and what happened next would shatter a city, not just for what was done, but for what one family decided to do when no one else would. They took the case into their own hands, and the moment they saw that post, the clock started ticking. While Katrina stared at the screen trying to make sense of the post, something else started happening. Jasmine's friends began calling her, one after the other. They weren't just worried. They were certain of something. The photos Jasmine posted weren't new. They were old shots she had once sent privately to her girlfriends in a Snapchat group. They'd never been online before. Never meant to be shared publicly. Jasmine wasn't even the type to post that kind of image. Someone else had control of her account. And whoever it was, they didn't just have her login. They had her phone. Because it was off. Completely unreachable. Within minutes, Travis Pace was at Katrina's side. Panic was no longer a feeling. It was a fact. They had already reached out to every friend, every contact. No one had seen her. Something was very wrong. They made the call. They told the police their daughter, Jasmine Nicole Pace, was missing. Officers from the Chattanooga Police Department arrived quickly and began taking statements. On paper, it was routine. A 22-year-old woman had texted that she wanted to be alone after losing someone close. No signs of a struggle, no calls for help, and no hard proof of danger. But in Katrina's gut, there was no doubt. This wasn't her daughter going silent. This was something else. something darker. As the officers asked their questions, Katrina wasn't waiting. She was already working the problem from another angle. She called the phone company. Jasmine was on a shared plan with the family. That meant she had access. She requested a full call log for the last several days. The company handed it over. She called every number, every contact. Most people said the same thing. They hadn't heard from Jasmine. They didn't know where she was, except for one. A friend told her they'd spoken to Jasmine on the night of November 22nd, but just for a few minutes. 2 or 3 tops. Katrina checked the report again. It wasn't 2 minutes. It was 71. A full hour and 11 minutes. That wasn't a mistake.
He just lied and said that he had talked to her for a few minutes Monday, and she said we had to meet. He talked to her for 71 minutes. He would remember that. He talked to her for over an hour, and he just lied.
The officer leaned in and asked the question that had to come next. Who was the person she'd been on the phone with for over an hour? And how were they connected to Jasmine? Katrina gave the name, Chen. She explained that Jasmine had met him through a dating app around 7 months earlier. They had been seeing each other since, but it was casual. Serious enough for late-night calls, but not serious enough to meet the parents. That alone didn't sit right. If Jason considered himself her boyfriend, then why hadn't he reached out? Why hadn't he called the family when she vanished? And why claim their 71-minute conversation was only a few minutes long? Every word he gave seemed designed to shrink the truth. And now her mother was accusing him. The officers noted it, filed it, then left. Investigators discovered that Jasmine had previously filed a restraining order against an ex. The relationship had ended badly. Was it the ex, not Jason, who should be the focus? While detectives tried to figure that out, Katrina didn't stop. She remembered something. Jasmine had recently bought a white Chevy Equinox, a new car. And that car came with a tracking system. It was called My Chevy. Katrina opened the app, and there it was. The car was parked at Signal View condominiums off Mountain Creek Road, a place Jasmine had never mentioned, a part of town where she didn't know anyone. They rushed there with the spare key Jasmine had left her mother for emergencies. The car was locked. Everything looked intact. But when they opened the driver's side door, something was immediately wrong. The seat. It was pushed all the way back, far enough that someone Jasmine's height, just 5'2", couldn't have possibly reached the pedals. Someone much taller had been behind the wheel last. Someone who didn't want her to be found. They called the police again. But just like before, they didn't wait for action. They took it themselves. One of the security guards agreed to help. He queued up the surveillance footage from the night the car appeared. The screen flickered to life. There it was. The white SUV turning into the lot under the dim glow of the parking lights. To a stranger, it looked like nothing. But to Katrina and Travis, it screamed. Because it wasn't what the camera showed that mattered. It was what it didn't. The white SUV pulled into the lot at exactly 8:41 p.m. on November 23rd. The timestamp was clear, but the trail before that moment was gone. The tracking data, the one thing that could have revealed where the vehicle had been before it stopped, was missing, wiped clean. Someone had gone out of their way to erase the car's movement history before it arrived. Whoever left the SUV there didn't just park and walk away. They made sure it left no trail behind. The family now had something, but it also felt like nothing. The cameras had captured the vehicle arriving, but not the driver. The shadows never gave up a face. The lens never caught a figure stepping out. It was like the car appeared and the story stopped. A dead end. When officers arrived, they took the footage, but with no new data, no physical evidence, no sighting. It felt like the search was stalling. For the first time since Jasmine vanished, it seemed like there was nowhere else to look. Or so they thought. Because what the family didn't know was that Jasmine's closest friends weren't ready to give up. Not even close. They had started talking, sharing what they knew, comparing the last things she'd said, the messages, the calls, the posts. and they decided to take their voices public.
We want her home and we want her safe.
Bailey Putman is doing anything she can to try to bring her childhood friend home. Jasmine Pace hasn't been seen since November 22nd. Chattanooga police are investigating the case as a missing person.
Her mom has not an ounce of sleep. I don't think she is 8.
Jasmine was last seen here on surveillance video leaving her mom's house. They believe she was trying to leave town to grieve a recent death in the family, but they knew something went wrong when she didn't show up to Thanksgiving dinner.
And that is so very unlike her. There's not a day that they don't hear from Jasmine, let alone an hour.
Once Jasmine's disappearance became public, her friends knew they couldn't stay silent. They didn't want people to just notice the story. They wanted them to know who she was. Her name is Jasmine Nicole Pace, 22 years old. Born May 29, 2000. Raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She lived in East Ridge, but her roots ran back to Ringgold, Georgia. She grew up surrounded by family, her mother Katrina, her father Travis Wayne Pace. Everyone close to her called her Jazzy. She was studying communications at Chattanooga State Community College, a perfect fit for someone who was vibrant, confident, and full of energy. Her dream was to work in a field where she could express herself and lift others up. That's who she was. A listener. A natural light. She had a bond with her sister Gabby that was more than just family, it was soul-level connection. She was glued to her best friend, Emma. She was godmother to a little boy named Juan. Always talking about becoming a mother herself one day. Her love for animals ran deep, especially her 4 cats. She called them her babies. Every detail in her life had meaning. Even her tattoos. One of them, a tiny, sleepy panda, always made her smile. And those tattoos on her arm, they were more than art. They were her story, her timeline, her truth. While the public was just beginning to understand who Jasmine was through the voices of her friends, Katrina was drowning in something else entirely. Silence. The kind of silence only a mother knows. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through old texts between her and Jasmine, trying to make sense of anything. That's when she found it. A message. It had been sent in the early hours of November 23rd. No words, no context, just a pin, a location. Katrina's heart stopped. Then she called Travis. By Sunday, November 27th, they were standing at the spot from that pin, 110 Tremont Street. It was a quiet apartment complex, normal from the outside. But Katrina and Travis weren't looking for normal. They went door to door, asking every resident, until one neighbor paused. He said he knew Jasmine. She'd visited someone in apartment 210. Travis didn't wait for anyone to explain. He ran to the door, knocked. Nothing. So he forced it open. And what they saw changed everything. A small travel bag on the counter. Jasmine's. Cleaning products out in the open. A thick chemical smell in the air. In the desk drawer, her license, her credit cards. The place wasn't just suspicious. It was screaming. They searched every corner, gathered everything they could. Notebooks, phones, a tablet, a camera. And then they found it. A journal with a name written inside. Jason Chen. Now they had a name to match the dread in their gut. Travis bolted outside and started digging through the building's dumpster. Inside, a pair of white sneakers, a pair of blue pants, and just as the weight of it all was settling in, the neighbors called the police. The officers arrived. When officers from the Chattanooga Police Department arrived at 110 Tremont Street, they didn't expect what they walked into. Katrina, Travis, a group of neighbors, all already inside apartment 210. They explained the situation, that Jasmine was missing, that this was the last location tied to her, and that her belongings were found inside. The officers listened carefully. They took in the panic, the urgency, the fear, but they also had to lay down the law. No matter how serious the situation seemed, breaking into someone's home without permission could damage the entire case. If the person who lived here was involved in Jasmine's disappearance and the scene was compromised, the path to justice could collapse. The officers finished taking statements. They logged the address, and they left. But not for long. By midnight they returned, this time with a search warrant in hand. Now the investigation was official. What they found inside would shift the entire direction of the case. On the hardwood floor in the living room were reddish stains that looked like they had soaked into the grain. In the bathroom, grout between the tiles was discolored. In the bedroom, the carpet was stained, dark, and spattered. On the bathroom wall, more stains. And that chemical smell, still thick in the air. The apartment wasn't just messy, it had been scrubbed. There were bottles of peroxide, paper towels, alcohol, cleaning supplies scattered across the space, some still out on the counters. In the bedroom, the furniture had been moved. Heavy drag marks showed where something large had shifted. Underneath the bed, they found it. A deep, soaked stain no one could explain away. Lying on top of the bed, a kitchen knife. On the living room floor, shattered glass. Almost every room held something. Every surface told a story. They brought in Blue Star, the chemical used to detect blood even after it's been cleaned. The lights were shut off. The solution sprayed. The hallway, the walls. What they saw confirmed what the smell had already suggested. This apartment hadn't just been cleaned. It had been scrubbed in a panic. And by the time they finished the sweep, they knew. They weren't looking for a young woman who'd walked away on her own. They were looking for what was left behind. That night, 110 Tremont Street changed from a location on a map to something far more chilling. That message Jasmine sent her mother in the early hours of November 23rd, the one Katrina hadn't seen until days later, would turn out to be the last thing Jasmine ever did on her phone. And for her family, it would be the last breadcrumb. Because from that moment on, the investigation was no longer in their hands. It was in the hands of law enforcement. If Jason Chen had anything to do with Jasmine's disappearance, or worse, detectives would need one thing to prove it. A timeline. Starting with November 22nd. At first it felt like a long shot. They had almost nothing. Just surveillance footage of Jasmine's SUV pulling into a parking lot at Signal View condominiums. But what the investigators didn't know yet was how many cameras had been watching Jason Chen. Everywhere. On the night of November 22nd, Jason called Jasmine. The call lasted 1 hour and 11 minutes. Not long after that call, just before midnight, Jasmine's white SUV was caught entering the parking lot of Jason's building. The next morning, Jason was alone. Security footage showed him walking into a Walmart. He bought peroxide, bandages, cleaning supplies, all paid for at self-checkout. Later that day, he walked into a Walgreens, more supplies, paper towels, rubbing alcohol. Then, at exactly 8:27 p.m., Jason left his apartment again, this time wearing a white hoodie, his face partially wrapped in a scarf. Cameras caught him driving Jasmine's SUV across town. He left it at the Signal View condos. A few minutes later, a dark ride-share vehicle picked him up and dropped him back off at Tremont Street. That same night, just hours later, Jason was seen again, dragging a large suitcase out the front door of his building. Moments later, his black Toyota Camry pulled out of the lot and disappeared into the night. Now the question became sharper. Was Jasmine inside that suitcase? And if she was, where did he take her? There was only one person who knew the answer, and now it was time to find him.
He's gonna pat you down. He's gonna place in handcuffs. Nobody's gonna arrest you. Just call us and you go to the back of the car. So you get to put the handcuffs. Good.
Okay. So you said there was a search warrant for me?
Correct. Yeah. There's search warrant for your person. So we're Norfolk Police Department. We're gonna be detaining you in the collection of search warrant. We're assisting Chen.
Okay. And is there any like calls or anything?
Yeah. They're gonna explain. That's okay. Yeah. We're gonna let them do that, but I don't want to speak for them. Yeah, we don't want to let you misinform you of anything, so they'll tell you all that when we get down there, so just take it with them. They're the lead on this. We'll let them explain it, because we don't want to pile on information. We'll let them one time it all, you know. Okay. All right, so if you will, just face away from me.
Jason Chen was arrested at his parents' home. He didn't resist. But the truth didn't come from his words. It came from what was on him. Detectives searched the house. They took his phone, his backpack. Inside that bag, they found something small but critical. A SIM card. It belonged to Jasmine, but that wasn't all. Tucked between loose items and electronics, they found notes. Handwritten, carefully worded. Jason had been rehearsing. Every excuse, every lie, every answer he planned to give to police and to Jasmine's family, scribbled on sticky notes. He had mapped out his story before they ever knocked on the door. But what Jason didn't prepare for was this. They already knew it. The detectives walked him into the interrogation room. They weren't here for a story. They weren't chasing speculation. They had his movements. They had the surveillance. They had digital proof that he used Jasmine's phone after she was gone. What they didn't have was the most important answer of all. Where was Jasmine? Or more accurately, where was her body? Jason denied everything. No involvement, no wrongdoing, no knowledge of where she was. But investigators didn't waste time arguing. They took a DNA sample. Then they pulled the location history from his phone. And that's when the map told them what Jason wouldn't. On the evening of November 23rd, just hours after cameras captured him hauling a heavy suitcase out of his building, Jason's phone made a trip. It left the city. It followed a winding rural road, a rough stretch northwest of Chattanooga, flanked by a dense riverbank. Overgrown, isolated, wrapped in thick kudzu vines. On Thursday, December 1st, 2022, police followed the trail. They hiked into the brush, GPS guiding every step, until they saw it, half buried, tangled in vines, a suitcase, and inside was the truth. While investigators were navigating through thick brush and steep terrain to reach the location their GPS had locked onto, Katrina was receiving something else. The kind no parent is ever prepared for. That her daughter might not just be missing. That the search could be shifting into something final. That Jasmine might no longer be alive. But even then, Katrina wasn't ready to stop believing. She posted a message. A plea. If anyone knew where Jasmine was, if anyone had seen anything, she begged them to come forward. She didn't know that police were already closing in on the truth. But what she also didn't know was that her post would trigger something completely unexpected. People who knew Jason Chen started to talk. The name they remembered was Jason Chen, a 22-year-old computer science student. Sharp, intelligent, always 2 steps ahead. But that wasn't the whole picture. Friends began sharing more. He had a reputation, not just for his brain, but for crossing boundaries. He'd been known to steal from those closest to him. Small things, then more. He had a habit of shifting identities online, editing his photos, posing as someone else. One former friend, a man whose face Jason had used on social media, was forced to post a TikTok video just to clear his name.
So basically, everybody been hitting me up saying somebody using my photos, and I would like to address that. Yeah, the first photo she just showed was Jason Chen, but the next 2 photos throughout the video are actually photos of me. And I'll prove that later on, but yeah. So here's one of the photos on Jason's Visco. It was posted on January 24th, 2022. Then here's mine on my Visco, posted on January 3rd, 2022.
Once the family received confirmation that Jasmine had been found, their grief shifted into something else. They were no longer searching. Now they were preparing for a fight for accountability, for answers, for justice. But while the family braced for the next chapter, detectives were waiting on something else. The final autopsy report. The report confirmed that Jasmine had suffered 60 injuries, all concentrated in a specific area, pointing to extreme force and intent. One detail stood out. Part of the blade had broken off. The tip was later discovered lodged inside her. But the most critical finding came from the lab. Traces of DNA linked directly to Jason Chen were identified on Jasmine's body. No more speculation. No more doubt. It was no longer a question of if. It was now a matter of why. On December 8th, 2022, the family held a funeral for Jasmine Nicole Pace. It was quiet, intimate, heartbreaking. But they didn't retreat from the spotlight, because the very next day, December 9th, they were in court, standing face to face with the man accused of taking Jasmine from them. The hearing was to determine whether Jason Chen could be released on bond. But for her family, it was the first time they saw him not as a name in a file, but as the person who would have to answer for everything. The judge set bail at $5 million. Jason Chen didn't pay it. He stayed behind bars, locked inside Hamilton County Jail in Chattanooga, Tennessee, awaiting trial. The date was set. Monday, January 13th, 2025. It had been over 2 years since Jasmine Nicole Pace vanished, and now the case that had shaken a city was heading into court. The prosecution came in confident. They had everything: the timeline, the surveillance, the forensic trail, the SIM card, the suitcase, and most important, they had Jasmine. To them, it felt airtight. But when the courtroom doors opened and the defense took their place, everything shifted.
We were really going to be methodical about proving identity, proving that it was Jason that did it, proving that it was intentional, going through, making sure we convinced the jury that this is him in this photograph. Well, then they admit to it. So we really changed, we pivoted to only premeditation.
The courtroom was packed. On one side of the aisle, the defense, Joshua Weiss from Cavett. On the other, the prosecution, District Attorney Cody Wamp and lead homicide prosecutor Paul Moyle. Everyone expected a battle, but no one expected the defense to open with a stunning admission. Jason Chen's legal team admitted he had taken Jasmine's life. What they challenged was how and why. Joshua Weiss told the court this wasn't planned. It wasn't cold-blooded. It was a moment of panic. He claimed Jason and Jasmine had been drinking wine in his apartment, that things escalated after Jasmine saw Tinder notifications pop up on his phone. She got angry, confrontational. He said she picked up a broken glass. According to him, she attacked. Jason, they claimed, acted on instinct. That's when he grabbed a knife from the bedside table. That's when everything changed. The defense called it a crime of passion, not premeditation. But Cody Wamp stood up and made the courtroom go still. She didn't flinch. She didn't soften. She said this wasn't a moment of rage. This was methodical. The autopsy showed over 60 wounds, all concentrated on one side of Jasmine's body. Not scattered, not defensive, targeted. She told the jury what the forensic team had confirmed. Jasmine had been restrained while still alive. She wasn't able to fight back. And then she dismantled the rest of the defense. There were no Tinder alerts on Jason's phone that night, no alcohol in Jasmine's system. But what did happen was this. Jason had been actively messaging another woman, Victoria, on Tinder while Jasmine was in the apartment, around the exact time her life ended. Right after that, he messaged his friends, asking if they wanted to hop online and play Call of Duty. Security footage confirmed what came next. Jason was seen buying cleaning products, and a lot of them. Investigators found those same items in the apartment, along with signs of heavy scrubbing. He'd used Jasmine's phone, posted from her social media accounts, tried to craft a digital alibi. This wasn't a man who panicked. This was someone who calculated, who covered his tracks, who turned a crime scene into a cleanup job. And Cody Wamp made it clear to the jury, this wasn't a reaction. This was a choice.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Jason Chen, guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
January 21st, 2025. Jason Chen was found guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime documentaries. See you in the next video.